My friends, welcome back to Jalen's Jumpstart. Today, we get to hear yet from another extraordinary sports reporter. He's a sports reporter for CBS Sports. He also played in the NFL. He played for two NFL teams. He played for the Green Bay Packers and at the time what was known as the San Diego Chargers. And that name is Aaron Taylor. This gentleman is just magnificent. I had the opportunity to speak with him when I was helping out with CBS Sports a few months back in Annapolis. It was the Navy versus Air Force game. And he was very insightful with everything that we talked about. And today we get to hear more from him. So his story is great, magnificent. Everything that he has to say about, you know, college football, how he got to college football, the transition from college football to professional, then professional to working on air. It's just incredible. So please stay tuned. Also, huge shout out to Yosho Place for facilitating this space for me to use for today's podcast. Their Instagram handle is YOSHOWPLACE. Yosho. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor, for joining me today. Just to get things started, why football? I know you have a huge football background. You've played for Notre Dame and the Green Bay Packers, but what kind of drew your passion towards football?
Well, I grew up in the Bay Area in the early 70s and mid 80s. And in the mid 80s, there was this guy, Refrigerator Perry, that played for the 85 Bears. And he was this big old D lineman that played or that scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl they had against, I think it was the New England Patriots. So Fridge was a nickname that I got. So when we played backyard football or out in the street, I was always Fridge, and I would be the one that would run people over because I was the biggest kid. So my first introduction to football wasn't playing in pads. I was one of those classic tweeners where it was like I was too old or I was too fat for my age group and too young for my weight class. So I never really got to play Pop Warner. So I didn't play organized football till my freshman year. I broke my ankle like on day 3. So I got a really late start at it. But what I found was the more I played, the harder I worked, the better I got. Everybody worked hard, everybody played hard, but they got a little bit better. I got a lot better. And that was the combination of my work ethic, but also the God-given talent that I had nothing to do with. And I just had success there, and it's been opening doors ever since. And I believe the greatest game ever created because it is able to keep score on how well we deal with adversity, how well we work together as a team. And I think those two fundamental things are important areas in all aspects of life. And I'm 51 years old and still on scholarship. How do you beat that?
Agreed. So you would say like your talent is what brought you to those to playing in college and professional. It was the talent that was okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a combination of both. Like we all have cats that had talent that maybe didn't move on and have an opportunity to play. When you look at just their physical talent and skill set, you're like, man, that dude's got a chance. He could be D3, D2, D1, whatever, but didn't. So I think it's both. And I think for me, it was the combination of a willingness to work because my experience, Jalen, is that everybody wants to be successful, but not everybody's willing to do what that success requires. And that's a great differentiator, great separator of people that continue to ascend and those that get stuck wherever they're at. The goal for all of us is to be the best versions of ourselves, whatever that is. My potential to be a pro beach volleyball player like my wife was is going to be limited. So my best version of playing pro beach volleyball would be like to win a game all season versus get to the Olympics like she did. So it's a relative scale somewhat, but I think the combination of talent, work ethic, environment, support from my caregiver, who was my mom, who was a single mom, going to a good program that had good coaches that would pour into me, finding coaches along the way that would challenge me to be the best version of myself, that helped me to believe that I'm capable of doing things that I didn't think were possible. All of those dominoes fell into place. And from a certain respect, I feel lucky, and it almost feels divine how how effortless it was from that standpoint. But there were a lot of things that had to line up for me to quote unquote, be lucky and play in the NFL.
Okay. And how would you compare the difference in competition when you were playing in college versus professional? They're both high competition, of course, but I'm thinking like, would you say things were more demanding once you got to the professional level?
What's the best way to put this? I gave up more sacks and pressures in my first mini camp than I did my entire senior season at Notre Dame, a season in which I won the Lombardi Award. The
Wow.
level of competition, there were dudes that I would have to dig deep and be almost perfect with that weren't even going to be on the team. The coaches knew it, they knew it. They were just there to be bodies and the service people. Those dudes were better than half the cats I played my senior year at Notre Dame, and we played a pretty tough, challenging schedule. So that's the difference. Everybody can run, block, catch, tackle, or throw, but the ones that are able to be elite and to play at that next level, it's the little things, it's the consistency, it's
Hmm.
the impact that they can have. And I think a perfect example is I played against this guy, Junior Seau, Gold Jacket Pro Football Hall of Famer, played for the San Diego Chargers. That's where I finished my career. I had played against him when I was with Green Bay and played with him when I was with the Chargers. And he would shut our practice down. Like they would have to take him out so that we could operate our offense sometimes during training camp when we were with the Chargers because his instincts were so good. He was so explosive, so quick. And the shortest distance between point A to point B is a head start. And Junebug always had a head start. But that was the difference. In college, if I had to cut off a linebacker, I may go at a 45-degree angle. In the NFL, if it was a stretch play or a toss play, I'd have to go so flat. It was almost like 10 degrees just to have a chance to maybe outside the numbers nick them so that the running back could go. It's a game that's played at a speed and an intensity that's really hard to describe unless you've been there. And even within that, there are different levels. There's a preseason speed, there's a regular season speed, there's a playoff speed, there's NFC and AFC championship speed, and then there's Super Bowl speed. And each one of those was an eye-opening experience where you walk away and you're like, I had no idea that this sport could be played at that speed and that level of intensity. It's remarkable how elevated the talent level and what is required to be successful in professional sports as it is even in the best of college teams.
Sheesh. Yeah, it sounds like it's very fast paced as well. More fast paced, more so than college. So whenever you finished your professional football career, what was the transition like whenever you started covering college football?
Man, I crashed and burned, Jalen, when I got done. There was Sports Illustrated had an article, I think in 2009 they did, where it wasn't a scientific study, but it was pretty meaty. And they polled ex NFL players within 24 months of retirement. And what they found was that 77%, almost 8 out of 11 players in an NFL huddle on one side of the ball, were
Hmm.
one or more of the following within the first 2 years of retiring: drug and alcohol dependent, divorced, or bankrupt. Now, as a professional athlete, you think you got all your stuff together and that you're different. And I was, but I was unique just like everybody else. So for me, it was drug and alcohol addiction. And what was so hard about transitioning out of sports is I had always been what I'd always done. So I'd never experienced who I was without saying, hi, I'm Aaron Taylor, the football player, the first round draft pick, the Lombardi Award winner, the Green Bay Packer, the this, the that. So I didn't know who Aaron was. So I tried to replicate the excitement by getting in fights or drinking or going to the club or big time in it, but there was this void inside. And what I realized that sports for me and for many of us provide what I call the 5 pillars of fulfillment. One's an income. That's how I receive value for the value I bring. The next is identity, how I'm known to the world. But there's another piece we don't often consider, and that's how I'm known to myself. Who
Yeah.
am I? Who is Aaron? I know who AT is. But beyond that, there was a sense of purpose. Like, why am I here? Why am I put on this planet? There's a sense of community, right? Being part of something greater than yourself. And then there's being of having this sense that you get validation about what it is you do in every play, how I make a difference. And those things were all wrapped up in the football for me. So when it ended, man, there I was. I didn't know what to do and crashed and burned. And so that process took a lot. But
Yeah.
thankfully, I didn't fall too far, too fast, and I was able to climb out of it. I've been, in recovery and sober for almost 2 decades. And from that, I created opportunities for doing stuff like this and being the guy that would give interviews after games and that sort of thing. I did a couple post-game shows that I did immediately after retiring. And then I auditioned for a couple things. One thing led to another. I got a job at ABC working with Craig James and John Saunders. May his soul rest in peace. Became a really good, dear friend of mine. And the rest is history, man.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that I've realized as I've grown more into watching professional sports, not just with football, but just any sport in general, is that everyone has a story about, like no one's perfect. You see all these professional athletes doing their thing and they're all flashy, just, what we would say put on the front. But at the end of the day, we're not all perfect. So I appreciate you for sharing that.
No, you're
Um,
welcome, man.
so you worked with John Saunders and Craig James at ABC Sports. Could you tell me a little bit about what that was like?
Oh man, that's a great question. Those dudes, they took the rookie up underneath their wing and made sure that I was doing well in a seat that was probably too big for me initially. But I had a relationship with Craig James. I clicked right away with John, so the chemistry was there. So I felt like the executives at ABC were like, all right, we're gonna give this young buck a chance. But what people don't understand is there are windows in sports television. So there's a noon window, there's a 3:30 window, and then there's usually a primetime window. And within that window, there's dozens of games that go on. So ABC at the time, we had the Big Ten, we had the ACC. We'd have games going all over the country that would go to halftime at the same time. So we would have to tap dance and go between games, and kind of figure it out and keep it linear. So decisions were getting made at the last minute. And boy, Jalen, let me tell you what, man, things were moving fast. So we had this one scenario where something was going to happen. We got information late. It was like a high stress situation. They flip flopped something at the last moment. And I had been making fun of John during rehearsal. He busted something, which never happened. But I'm like, okay, a rookie going to have an opportunity to make fun of this seasoned vet. So it was very locker room and, good natured and sport. So he had messed it up. We go on live, boom, the red light comes on. It comes to me and I completely crumble. I'll just mush mouth, and John got this big smile on his face. He takes us to commercial. Dropped my head once we went to commercial and shook it. It was like, dang, knowing I made a mistake. And John just starts laughing. He's like, oh man, he's like the young rookie learning that there's a big difference between understanding the game of football and bringing it to life on television, doesn't he? And I was like, man, yes, sir. So those were the ways that we had fun at work, but also his way of like taking the pressure off. Like, you don't have to be perfect, and there's an art to this, and you got to work with it. So as that show and many others in the years would string along, he'd always be like, hey, remember in that segment when you said it this way? Don't do the long read up or run up. Just get right to it. Say what you think out of the gate and then support it versus this long, big reveal. So, man, I'll cherish those moments, as well as the dinners, as well as the time together at Disneyland with his family and my family. And that was back in the ABC days and Disney. And we was all happy to get free Disneyland tickets. But at 51 years old, man, I've had the opportunity to stay on meaningful teams where I'm not the most important person, but I'm an important person. And I think that's what I appreciate the most about this business. I get to be a good teammate and I get to play with good teammates in a sport that I love.
Okay. So Mr. Taylor, how did you recover from making those minor mistakes on television, would you say? Just because it's one step at a time, I would say. When I'm putting together my reels, I'm always told to just say what you think, as opposed to just following the script. So what steps did you take to really get back in the groove of sports when you're telling stories on television?
Yeah, it's habit. The more you do anything, the better you're going to get at it. So it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Doing things like looking in the mirror and having a monologue about any subject that's random. Somebody could give it to you, and you just got to look in your eyes and think as you speak. It's nerve wracking, but that replicates the anxiety that can happen when that red light comes on. So if you can do
Yep.
that 20 times a month, after 12 months, you've got 300 reps underneath your belt that are the same thing as if you did a live hit on a sideline, but you've been in your bathroom, right? So there are things that we can do to supplement, but the more we do anything, the better we get at it. I think for me, and this was true as an athlete, we want to be so perfect that we try to be perfect. And when we make a little bobble or something, it feels like a huge bobble. And now we got to manage what I call Ernie, my alter ego, that negative voice that, is in my head. Uh, and that just takes away from the performance. And that typically starts a spiral. So for me, what I'll do when I make a mistake is I'll pat myself on the head and go, "It's okay, buddy. I know you was trying your best up there. You mush mouth that, but it's okay. We'll get it again." And I'm compassionate with myself. I'm acknowledging a mistake was made, but it's not the end of the world. And then I get another crack at it. I missed a ton of blocks. I gave up a ton of sacks. I had a ton of games that if I saw him now, I would melt, worried about what my coach was going to say to me. And he's been dead since 2013. But what's helped is I would keep things into perspective, because I was still a college football Hall of Famer. I still won the Lombardi. I still was a 2-time unanimous All-American, but I wasn't anywhere near perfect. So perfectionism, and those of us that suffer from it like I do, is really debilitating. So finding ways to negate that, finding ways to negate the anxiety of pregame anxiety and performance anxiety. I neutralize that with gratitude. As soon as I start getting nervous, I think about things I'm thankful for
Hmm.
love, for my higher power, for my wife, for my children, for cumin, for ice cream, for, brisket, like whatever it is. It could be people and things that we love, but it also be little things. Like I love sunrises. Man, some of my deepest memories when I'm camping or fishing or out is when the sun's coming up. It's new, it's fresh, the light is great. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, I like sunrises. So I'm grateful for those. So I start to think about the things, man, if I never got to experience X, Y, or Z again for the rest of my life, what would that be like? And I think about those in terms of the things I write down on my gratitude list. Now, all of a sudden, it's like butterflies. I appreciate butterflies, not a whole lot, but I'd never not want to see one again. So I
Hmm.
shift my attention to the things, away from the things that I'm worried about to the things that I'm grateful for. And,
Yep.
and gratitude is it's the greatest elixir, because it makes whatever it is we have enough. So that's one of many tools that I use to help me be at my best when my best is needed, when that red light comes on. But I still get nervous. I still mush mouth stuff. I still have better calls than others. But I keep things in perspective much better now at 51 than I did at 21.
Great, great. Yeah, gratitude, gratitude. I love that. I love that lesson. I'll keep that in mind for sure.
Okay.
Progress in this business. Now, I took a look at your platform, Elite Mentals.
Uh-huh.
If- Yeah, and I noticed that, you touch a lot on mental health and specifically targeting the Black community. And I know that as a person and as a man of color, that's pretty important. But what would you say your goals are for this platform?
To help Black and brown folks, people of all colors, to understand that our life experience is something that we can control. That how we experience life, 5 years, 5 months, 5 minutes from right now, is something that we can largely choose. But in order for that to happen, we have to change the way that we think. And that means having a really strict focus and attention on where we place our focus and attention. It means having a basic understanding of the way that our brains and minds work, so that we can understand when it gets scared, it thinks it's looking out for us. But now that there's not saber-toothed tigers jumping out of bushes or us falling through ice and the ice caps, like it's just an email or a text. We don't have to respond like the end of the world is coming, which is what my brain does, for example. So the goal of Elite Mentals is to share tips, tools, and techniques with folks where they can begin or continue their journey towards mental wellness, but in
Hmm.
a culturally relevant way. I think what happens in many facets for many communities is we try to sit in the ivory towers and tell people where they should go or what they should do. My goal is to meet folks where they're at and speak to them in a language that they understand. That's fashion, music, street art, and technology. So we basically just repackaging this information that's evidence-based, that's scientific, that is well-founded in research and neuroscience, but making it for us, putting a little thang on it and using music. And what started this whole thing for me was the belief that Black men don't talk about mental health. And I'm thinking, is that true? And I started thinking about this and thinking about it. And I was like, wait a minute, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, don't push me because I'm close to the edge. And as I started to look at music, there was multiple examples after examples after examples of how the transformative power of music had always addressed mental health. So I got with DJ Riz out of New York City. He put together a 9-minute mix for me that basically is a chronology or an anthology, if you will, of music going all the way back to Grandmaster Flash, all the way up to Kendrick or Drake, and using song and the lyrics from song is a gateway to help to bring to our attention that we all going through these things. And then when we can get what's going on the inside, on the outside, we can start to neutralize the effect of our negative experiences and the negative emotions that have taken place and have had on us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel that a lot of Black men, we don't really seek the therapy that we need or the guidance that we need because of the experiences. I was in the Black Male Success Initiative at George Mason University, and a lot of the things that we touched on was Black mental health and how we maneuver through life as we're going into the next phase of our lives after college. And it's a program where we just mentor other young Black men to take those next steps.
I love it, man. That's phenomenal, Jalen. I think that piece of connecting folks with the youngers or the olders working with the youngers and kind of connecting that whole linear chain, that chain's been broken in a lot of areas for our community. So that notion of an uncle or a mentor is a model that works, that we grew up with, has been endemic to the tribes that we came from and those sort of things. I think there's a misconception about mental health and what it takes and what it means, that we're weak. And I don't know if you're familiar, but there's a woman called Dr. Brene Brown. She's a white woman, but you wouldn't know what her name. And she is funny as can be and brilliant and incredibly successful. And based on her research at the University of Houston, she was able to figure out a ton of things about shame and guilt and mental well-being overall. So she was working with some special forces like Navy SEAL type guys and was talking about the importance of vulnerability. And her question was, can anybody show me a courageous act that didn't involve uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? And the guys thought about it like, no. She said, that's what being vulnerable it is. Being vulnerable is, it's being uncertain. It's being willing to take risks, and it takes emotional exposure. So whether you're running into the burning house, which would be considered an act of bravery, or sharing about your feelings and how you don't feel like you're good enough or worth loving, which is what's at the core of my story that I am continuing to try to break because my father wasn't involved in my life. Whether it's running to the burning house or touching that pain of feeling unloved and not good enough, it still requires uncertainty, it still requires risk, and it still requires emotional exposure. So the reality is there is no courage without being vulnerable. And that's why vulnerability is one of the most accurate measurements of courage. And that's just one of the many ways and the many great people out there that are trying to flip the script on mental health and what it means to get what's on the inside on the outside, that it's not weakness. In fact, it's the very opposite. And that's why so many of us, myself included, are averse to talking about those things. And we turn to anger, we turn to drugs and alcohol, we turn to sex, we turn to pornography, we turn to shopping, we turn to making money. We call it the isms. Whatever we can do to prevent us from feeling how we want to feel, it don't matter. We're all predisposed to things. But what I'm about is trying to set down the ism and pick up other tools that are more healthy so that we can touch and neutralize those negative feelings and impact not only our own life, but improve the lives of those around us as well.
For sure. Neutralizing that negativity is very important. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Taylor, for your time. I appreciate it. These were definitely very sensitive topics, but I'm glad that you were able to be very open with everything that we talked about today.
Well, I appreciate you, Jalen. And I want the listener to know that Jalen is unique in this respect, that I give my name and my number and my contact information to anybody that has shows an interest in this business. And I tell all of those folks the same thing I told Jalen, which is keep my number, reach out in the off season. If I'm available and can help you in your career, I will. Most don't, but Jalen did. And that goes back to how we started this conversation. Lots of people want to be successful, but not everybody's willing to do what that success required. So I'd imagine if we talked about uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, what it took for you to send me those first couple emails. When I didn't respond because I'm Mr. Busy Pants and you had to ping me again to risk bothering me, you stuck with it. And what I love about that, Jalen, is that you believed enough in yourself and your career to risk pissing me off or whatever the stories it is that we make up and still reached out. And that's why I'm here, because I believe in you and I believe in your belief about you. And when we can believe in ourselves as strongly as that, man, the world is our oyster. So it's been my pleasure to be here today. I want to take my hat off to you and continue to do what it is you're doing, because these skills, whether they manifest themselves in sports television or not, will serve you well for the rest of your life. And if you were a stock, I'd load up right now, because you are going to increase the value that you bring to whatever it is you do if you can keep these values at the core and center of what it is you're about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. That means so much coming from you. I appreciate all your guidance, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
All right. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thank you.